I hate the MCU. Me personally, I side with Mr. Martin.
Amusement park films.
I like real movies. I like art. And the MCU isn't art. Or so I thought.
He has risen, baby girl.
Fuck!
And I don't want the world to see.
The MCU is art and stems from quite an academic form of art. For a long time, I believe superhero movies were nothing more than quote-unquote theme park rides. But a couple years ago, I realized they are actually an extension of one of my favorite pieces of art, the epic poem. Now, for those of you who don't know what an epic poem is, let me explain. They're the oldest form of storytelling we own, dating all the way back to 2100 BC.
Long time ago.
They were a tradition of oral storytelling passed from generation to generation until they were eventually written down. The oldest example of such story is the Epic of Gilgamesh, which told of the great flood of the world, much like Noah and the Ark.
Get ready to climb aboard Noah's Orange Slice.
Actually, it's an art.
But the most recognizable epic poems come from ancient Greece, from this dude named Homer, who began to tell his friends stories. They told of gods and heroes and the turmoils that befell them. His two seminal works were the Iliad and the Odyssey. Although those may seem foreign to some of y'all, I promise you they aren't. The Trojan Horse, Achilles' heel, Cyclops, and Hades all come from Homer.
I know, I got it. I got the concept.
Epics have been made in the following centuries by different cultures as well, such as the Aeneid in Rome and the Anglo-Saxon epic Beowulf. These epic poems all had telltale signs of their genre, stereotypes if you will. And believe it or not, the MCU perfectly portrays these stereotypes and fits the mold perfectly as a modern American epic poem. The three stereotypes are the scope, the hero, and a certain element I'm going to save for the end. The first element is simple, the scope. An epic has to feel massive, and the easiest place to find that is in the length. From the Iliad to the Aeneid, epics should span hundreds and hundreds of pages, which makes sense when looking at the history of the genre. Epics were an oral tradition, so the extended nature lended well to a more episodic experience to be told over an extended period of time.
The misty mountains cold.
The MCU obviously passes these tests with flying colors. The now 34-movie series is easily the longest-running movie franchise in history, surpassing the 25 Bond movies that have been made since the 60s. The more impressive feat is that unlike those Bond films, the entire MCU is one long connected story, much like Homer's stories. The long-running list of movies and TV shows adds a level of scope that only epic poems of old can rival. The second way to achieve that epic feel is to have a large cast of characters and a multitude of smaller adventures contained within the overarching story. For example, the Odyssey's main plot is Odysseus trying to get home.
There are no rules, man. We're lost.
But within that, there are minor adventures such as the Cyclops, the Sirens, or the Lotus Flowers. All of these smaller stories help create the larger scale of the epic.
Wow.
Like the Iliad and the Odyssey, these stories are all connected to tell the overarching story of the cinematic universe. But within that grand Thanos plot is smaller stories like Ant-Man or Spider-Man Homecoming that really add to that epic feel by being small. Guardians of the Galaxy serves as an excellent example. On its own, it's a fun, swashbuckling adventure with a team of rascals in space. But in the grander scheme of things, it's the introduction of some of the major players in Infinity War, and one of the coveted 6 Infinity Stones, the Power Stone. Now they have to do a dance off to get it, but still, it is epic. By connecting this offshoot story and making it integral to the plot is how the MCU recreates the feel of an epic poem. The next characterizing factor of an epic is the specific kind of hero. The hero first and foremost has to be a warrior. Odysseus, Achilles, and Aeneas are all great warriors that have their heroics in battle plastered all over their respective tales. Marvel heroes heavily feature this warrior persona. Black Widow and Hawkeye reminisce on their varying war stories throughout.
It's like Budapest all over again.
You and I remember Budapest very differently.
And all of the characters at one point or another resemble these famed warriors and gods, sometimes even literally. Captain America's resilient,
I can do this all day.
Yeah, I know.
and Black Panther's triumphant,
Wakanda forever!
all coincide with the familiar war cries of these ancient heroes. The hero of an epic poem must also be a pioneer or a representative of their culture. It could be a specific aspect of said culture, such as Odysseus portraying the Greek virtue of hospitality, or Aeneas being not only a literal pioneer of Rome, but also a metaphorical one for Roman virtue. The hero has to be the embodiment of his or her culture. Characters of the MCU follow suit, embodying unique aspects about America's culture.
I'm gonna have to ask you to exit the donut.
The obvious example here is Captain America. He clearly is a statue of American valor,
Get away! Get back!
and virtue. The first Avenger displays not only his yearn for standing up against bullies, but also his country's need to stand against tyranny. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier does an interesting job trying to translate the complicated feelings about America's past to the present day. Tony Stark also displays America's complicated relationship to weapons and warfare in the early 2000s. As Tony begins becoming paranoid about war and violence, so does America.
And that is why, effective immediately, I am shutting down the Weapons Manufacturer Division of Stark International.
So that in Civil War, the square-off between Captain America and Iron Man is actually a battle between American ideals of the past and American fears of the present. Really, all of the Marvel characters embody some aspect of their culture. Characters like Shang-Chi and Ms. Marvel represent the varying diversity of cultures within America, and how the US is more of a melting pot of different people and ideas. The grand scope and specific kind of hero have been established, but one final aspect I've been saving till the end of the video remains. And that element of the formula is fate. Fate plays an interesting role in the epic genre. Everything has a predetermined outcome through the Greek and Roman epics. For example, Aeneas is fated to find Rome, and throughout the book it is made apparent that everything happens, quote-unquote, if only the fates were willing.
I'm tired of this, Grandpa!
That's too damn bad!
And this has been the thing that I've always had a hard time connecting, as fate has always been elusive to the MCU, and it's the one connection I've never been able to make until this scene.
Hey, what was that?
Went forward in time to view alternate futures, to see all the possible outcomes of the coming conflict.
How many did you see?
14,605,000.
How many did we win?
One.
Here we see that Tony Stark is fated for the iconic moment, the snap.
Oh no!
This has been set in stone from the very, very start, whether it be his vision in Avengers Age of Ultron,
This is how you end, Tony.
or the famous press conference.
I am Iron Man.
Which is why it's such a damn shame they're bringing him back as Dr. Doom. Which leads to my final point. There is an argument to be made that this comparison only works for the Infinity Saga, as the overarching story has kind of been lost, and the emphasis on theme park-like thrills of cameos and things like that have replaced it. But the MCU Infinity Saga does perfectly match with one of the most fundamental art forms of human history. I'm not saying that it's the most prolific or even the most amazing piece of art, but to deny it of its heritage is just wrong. The MCU, at its most basic form, is an epic poem, and therefore a work of art.